Hi everyone, I just want to do a second part to my last video because there's something really important that I noticed that I didn't notice before, and it has to do with this trident over here, what looks like the letter psi in the Greek. And I just noticed a second meaning over here for the word trident. It says it's a U.S. design of submarine launched long-range ballistic missiles. And so now this makes even more sense because the name of the ballistic missile that's launched by a submarine is called a trident. And so you see this trident over here, and it's under this big long wave. So it's like it's producing a massive wave over here. And so this makes a lot more sense now when you consider the fact that this symbol actually refers to a wave function, as I stated in my last video. And that was in this article over here, the two meanings of psi, but there were other articles that came up concerning this letter and what it means, the symbol. And there's another one over here which explains it. You can see this is the letter psi, or actually it's pronounced psi in the Greek, but it says it's often used to represent the study of psychology. For example, the symbol is used for psychology or psychologist. In biological terms, it's used to represent water potential. In astrology, it's the symbol that represents Neptune. And of course, Neptune is the god, or Poseidon is the god of the sea, or of the water. And so you see that this is representing water. It's representing a wave over here. Okay, and in physics, it says it's a symbol to represent the quantum mechanical wave function. Okay, and so that's why it was showing all these waves in this Google drawing. Okay, and that would also explain this point over here. It looks like a pen or a pencil, but if you look at images of the Trident ballistic missile, which I just pulled up, you see that it has that kind of a point as well. So I think it's clearly trying to depict ballistic missile here, the Trident. And I'll just go through a few more of these images over here so you can see what it looks like. It's also interesting that it's creating a little point over here, which seems to be inserting something into his forehead. It's coming from this trident. I believe this is what will set things off, the mark of the beast system. And I just want to emphasize the fact that this imagery right here is very important. Something I've been wanting to talk about for a long time, how when the Mount of Olives splits, this represents the consummation of the covenant. I believe that's what's being depicted by the Mount of Olives. So I want to do an elaborate video about that. That's if the Lord doesn't return first. And over here, this looks like the sky splitting, as in Revelation 6:14. Okay, it says, "And heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places." And if you look at this in the Greek, where it says departed, heaven departed as a scroll, you see that this word actually means parted. And so I'll show you that. It means to divide, to separate, sever, part asunder. And that's Strong's 673, and that was in Revelation 6:14. I've talked about how I believe the number 14 represents the splitting apart, or the parting. And it's here in verse 17. It says, "For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand?" So it's interesting that comes up in verse 17, but the separation takes place in verse 14, just like it will with the Mount of Olives, when the Mount of Olives splits. Okay, so you see the sky splitting over here, and it's interesting that it's splitting right where his head is, where his brain is, because this all has to do with DNA as well. But you see the earth splitting over here, so you have the sky splitting, and then the earth is splitting over here. And it talks about that here in Isaiah 24:19, where it says, "The earth is broken asunder, the earth is split through, the earth is violently shaken." But if you read it in context, you see that it says, "And it will be that he who flees the report of the disaster will fall into the pit. He who climbs out of the pit will be caught in the snare, for the windows above are open," just like it said in Genesis 7:11. "And the foundations, or the wellspring, as in Maxwell, of the earth will shake." And then I just read this verse, but then it says, "The earth reels to and fro like a drunkard, it totters like a shack, for its transgression is heavy upon it, and it will fall and never rise again." Okay, another thing that's interesting is in Revelation 6:14, it says, "The heaven departed as a scroll." And so I just looked at the word scroll, and in the Greek it's the word biblion, which means book. That's where we get the word Bible from, but it means book in the Greek. But it reminded me of the scroll, the flying scroll in Zechariah 5, because that's referred to as a scroll as well. And you may already know that this has been interpreted to refer to a ballistic missile as well, and so they're calling it a scroll. Okay, and if you look at it in the Hebrew, you see that the word is this word Megillah, which means a scroll, a roll, or a book. And then conveniently enough, in this Google drawing, you have a book, which really didn't make a lot of sense when I first saw this. I knew it had to be important, but I didn't understand why. But now that I realize it's referring to the scroll or the roll here, the Megillah. Okay, so now this makes a lot more sense, because the flying roll or the scroll is the Megillah, which would be the ballistic missile. And then it's interesting that it ends over here with verse 11, where it says, "And he said unto me to build it a house in the land of Shinar." And this all started in Babylon with the Tower of Babel in Genesis 11. And you see this is coming up in verse 11. You can see that right here in Genesis 11. It says, "The whole earth was of one language and of one speech, and it came to pass as they journeyed from the east that they found the plain in the land of Shinar. And they dwelt there, and they said one to another, Go, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. And they said, Go to, let us build a city and a tower whose top may reach to heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the earth. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men builded. And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they began to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. It's coming up in Genesis 11:7. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore is the name of it called Babel. And this is in 11:9, which is 9:11 backwards, because the Lord there did confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of the earth. Okay, and I've said this before, but I believe that the Tower of Babel, the first tower that was built, that it probably had a lot more to do with than just a tower. I think there was more to it than just building a tower, just like there was a lot more to building this tower, the Twin Towers, than just building a tower. I believe it was all about DNA ultimately. And the other thing that I wanted to point out is this also looks, aside from looking like the sky is splitting apart, this also looks like two helixes, and like I said earlier, it's located right where his head is, where his brain is, so this would be the two DNAs splitting, I believe. And so I believe it represents the restoration of the temple, the splitting apart of good and evil, as well as the mark of the beast and the evil that will take place. I believe it all happens at the same time. And as I said earlier, another thing about the letter Psi, or the letter C in the Greek, is that it's the 23rd letter of the Greek alphabet. And as I said before, 23 is a number that represents DNA. That's why Bush read Psalm 23 and then Obama read Psalm 46, because this is all ultimately about DNA. It's interesting that it has a numeric value of 700. 7 is the number of completion, and of course this is the Hebrew year 777. It's the year 2017. Okay, and so I just wanted to share that. I'm sure there's probably even more imagery here that I haven't noticed yet. If there's anything that you all see that I missed, then please let me know in the comments. And if you just have anything you'd like to share, if there's any other videos about this, I'd be interested to know. But anything that you'd like to share about this, please let me know in the comments. And thank you for watching, and God bless you.